The movie Long Voyage was shot in 2018 and was intended to release in mainland China in 2020. It got mysteriously cancelled and was released again on Tencent's streaming platform on May 27, 2023. However, after a few minutes of its online premiere, the movie was quickly disabled on the platform. All related contents about this film were deleted, be it streaming platforms or movie databases like Douban, except for a few press releases from the past. Today's video will walk you through the details of the horrifying events that this movie was based on. The Massacre on Squid ship LuRongYu 2682. Please like and subscribe, and here we go. It was a nice day in November 2010. The ship finally returned to Shidao port. The 33-member crew boarded the huge Squid ship after 2 weeks' wait. A winter storm is arriving, so they wrapped up their day early. After dinner, the crew then chilled in their cabins, playing poker, chatting, or reading novels. Around 8 o'clock at night, Yan the cook screamed, "Kill! Kill!" The entire crew were upset, but Yan wouldn't settle. He barged in every room he could find, and all he said was, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" It lasted for a couple of hours until the captain scolded him and locked him in a room. Around 1 a.m., Yan jumped off the ship and swam offshore. It took the crew half an hour to finally locate him and dragged him to the shore. The chief mate made sure to send Yan home that morning and recruited another cook, Xia, on board. Nobody understood why the experienced cook went hysteric that night, but this incident indeed summed up what was to happen on this ominous voyage. After over a month of maintaining equipment and stocking up on groceries and supplies, LuRongYu 2682 set sail for one of the world's main fishing grounds, Southeast Pacific. On December 28, 2010, the captain asked 18 of the crew who didn't have the seaman license to board a small boat provided by the Squid ship's company, who sent over 18 other people with qualifications to replace them. After the ship 2682 successfully passed the customs, it met with the boat at their meeting point to switch back the crew. The crew then lit firecrackers, which was a tradition to wish for a safe voyage, and embarked on their trip to Peru. Before hell breaks loose, let's meet the crew of LuRongYu 2682. The ship's leadership team included Li, the captain, 3 deck officers, 3 engineering officers, and Xia, the cook. The leadership team were quite experienced seafarers. Most of them were recruited by Captain Li, and they had worked together before. 2 of the engineering officers were relatives. Let's call them the Wen brothers. In fact, most of the workers were recruited because they were one another's friends, relatives, or because they come from the same area. In Chinese, we say they recognize each other as Laoxiang. Others were recruited by an agency in Dalian. In this way, the crew can roughly break up into 3 groups by where they come from: the Dalian group, the Heilongjiang group, and the Inner Mongolia group. The Dalian group mostly consisted of the ship's leadership team. The remaining workers mainly come from Heilongjiang or Inner Mongolia. Most people chose to join the crew because they wanted quick money. According to the contract, the base pay for this 2-year fishing job was 45k, and for every kilo of squid they caught, they get 50 cents. With this money, they can pay off debts, pay hospital bills for their sick family members, host a proper wedding ceremony, open a small shop, etc. February 28, 2011, LuRongYu 2682 arrived at Peruvian waters and started squid fishing. Among the crew, a guy called Liu Guiduo was most capable. He was able to catch way more squid than the rest of the workers. During the day, Liu Guiduo was always recording and calculating things on a notebook. It was also him who started to notice problems in their contracts. Word started to spread among the workers that there were traps in the contract's phrasing, which resulted in a pay that barely reached minimum wage. Morale started to dip, and the captain didn't care enough to intervene. Liu Guiduo once quarreled with the captain, asking him to turn the ship back in advance or he would sue the company, but the captain threatened him for boarding the ship without a seaman license, which could result in a big fine. June 17, 2011 was the day LuRongYu 2682 refills diesel. At around 11 p.m., Liu Guiduo and his gang hijacked the ship. It turned out that for the past 2 weeks, Liu Guiduo had been planning the coup. He managed to persuade about 8 people, most of whom were his Heilongjiang Laoxiang, to join him on this action. They used scrap steel on the ship, milled and ground them to make 9 knives. During the action, Liu assigned 2 of his men to watch the stairs. Then he brought 2 other men to beat, stab, and finally controlled Captain Li. The captain then reset the ship's course back to China. Soon, the remaining crew heard Liu Guiduo yelling from the bridge to weigh anchor. Xia, the cook, was one of the few experienced seafarers on board, also a friend of the chief mate. He couldn't let the ordinary seaman overturn the captain's management. He was last seen grabbing a cleaver from the kitchen and barging into the bridge. In fact, Xia was stabbed multiple times in the back and in the chest before he could enter the bridge. He was then stabbed in the legs and was tossed into the ocean. Liu Guiduo broke the communication tools on board, and the ship disappeared on the radar. After the hijack, a few more people joined Liu's gang. Liu collected and locked all the knives and locked all the lifeboats. Things were quiet for about a month. Without having to work, the workers were getting relaxed with the situation on the ship. But it was not the case for Liu Guiduo. Every time he saw people gathering in small groups and chatting in dialects, it got on his nerves. One day in July, Liu was informed that the ship was consuming much more fuel than was expected. He was noticeably more irritable. One day, one of Liu's gang, Bo, reported to him that the captain and the officers tried to persuade him to help them take back the ship. Liu was infuriated. Based on Bo's intel, he believed that the Wen brothers were behind the ship's recent abnormality with fuel consumption. The ship's officers and whoever was close to them must be eradicated. July 20th, late at night, the ship's speaker went on out of the blue and started playing loud music. Liu first grabbed the captain and the chief mate, ordering them to trick the chief engineer, who was one of the Wen brothers, to the bridge. As the chief engineer left the cabin, 2 of Liu's men quickly sneaked in and killed the other Wen brother in sleep. When the chief engineer finished talking to the captain and left the bridge, Liu's men emerged from the shadows, killed, and tossed his body in the ocean. The gang then moved to a 12-people cabin. They called people out of the room one by one, stabbed them, and forced the injured to jump into the sea. During the massacre, Liu made sure all of his followers participated and had blood on their hands. 7 people died in that night's action. Liu knew that he had gone too far. As soon as he arrived in China, he would undergo police investigation for the murders. So he changed his plan and decided to escape to Japan. This way, he needed to raise some funds for his new life in Japan. He called off the killing. The next morning, that is July 21st, Liu asked the remaining officers and workers to call their families and friends for money. Of course, under the excuses that they were sick and needed money for medicine. The fundraising wasn't easy. He didn't manage to get any money because the workers were either in debt or they were too poor. Liu then asked his men to kill the remaining officers and workers. He also killed Bo himself. When Liu was planning the killing yesterday, Bo suggested him to think twice. This, to Liu, meant Bo could no longer be trusted. By now, 11 were killed, and the number of people on board reduced from 33 to 22. After the killing, almost all of the remaining workers approached Liu to pledge their loyalty to him, hoping he would spare their lives. It was good news for Liu. He wanted money, and these people were so desperate that they would do whatever he said. So for the following days, that is July 23rd and 24th, he did the same thing, asking the workers to call their families and friends for money, at least 5K per person. However, he still didn't get much, simply because the workers' family didn't have that much money. Eventually, Liu had to turn to his own people, asking them to chip in for money they needed to buy fake IDs in Japan. This was not expected by Liu's initial followers, and they felt betrayed. Soon, rumor had it that Liu was only tricking everyone to contribute. His real plan was to fly to Japan with only a couple of his own trusted Laoxiang from Heilongjiang. One of the people holding this thought was Bao De. Although his name was not mentioned before, he was actually second in command of the hijackers. Since he was from Inner Mongolia, the Inner Mongolians among the hijackers were mostly following his lead. As tension built within the hijackers, Bao De sensed that a conflict between him and Liu Guiduo was inevitable, so he must get prepared. 4 of the 9 hijackers were from Inner Mongolia. 3 of them quickly formed an alliance and gathered the remaining 3 Inner Mongolian Laoxiang who surrendered to Liu to join them. Bao De then asked the Inner Mongolian gang to move to the cabin on the lower level, stay together, and communicate only in Mongolian. The other Inner Mongolian hijacker was the youngest of them all, called Huang Jingbo. Unlike the others who followed Bao De's lead, Huang was more attracted to Liu's charisma and listened to him. But this time, Bao De decided to persuade Huang to join them, for Laoxiang's sake. Bao De was not wrong, or not at first. Huang joined their secret meeting and told Bao De he wanted to be part of the Inner Mongolian gang because Liu's action of asking his supporters for money made him an untrustworthy leader. After the meeting, Huang found a chance to leave the cabin. He immediately approached Liu and stitched on Bao De. To gain the upper hand, Liu decided to strike first. He immediately found Captain Li and persuaded him to be on his side. Liu knew the captain saw the second mate as his own brother, who was stabbed 4 times, then tortured, and eventually tossed into the sea by Liu himself 4 days ago. He framed the second mate's death on Bao De, which successfully infuriated the captain and got the captain on his side. Liu came up with a plan to kill Bao De. He then sent his men to position and lured Bao De into his trap. First, Liu needed a bait. Cui was from Dalian. He was recruited on board by the agency. He was a big guy, big and lazy. He always tried to slack while working and spend all his money on gambling while not working. After the killing happened, he tried his best to keep a low profile and stayed neutral, not so much out of conscience, but more out of cowardice. But as Liu's power grew, it was no longer safe to not take sides. Earlier this day, Cui surrendered. He knocked on Liu's door and asked for a chat. He was now Liu's man. Liu Guiduo went to find Bao De like nothing had happened. He told him the captain wanted to surrender, but he decided to let the captain kill a worker who hadn't surrendered as a show of loyalty. Bao De agreed and let Liu borrow his knife. Then he followed Liu's command to collect Cui and brought him to the deck, where Liu would have the captain stand by. Beware, Bao De didn't know Cui was on Liu's side by then. Cui approached Liu directly early that day when Bao De was busy gathering his Inner Mongolia again. So this way, Bao De walked straight into Liu's trap, with Cui walking behind him with a knife and the captain waiting in front of him also with a knife. In a flash, the 2 men charged towards Bao De and stabbed him like crazy, but Bao De didn't come unprepared. He shouted to his Inner Mongolia gang to attack Liu, however nobody answered. Bao De was badly injured. The captain then forced him to give out the members of his Inner Mongolia gang, but failed, so he kicked him into the ocean. Cui, on the other hand, screamed in delirium, "I killed someone! I had blood on my hands! Yes!" It was already midnight. The captain started broadcasting to the entire ship through the speaker. He asked the Inner Mongolia gang to surrender. Liu Guiduo then added triumphantly that Huang was actually on his side and brought all their intel to Liu. This message was a bomb. Soon, Liu started calling people to the deck, and just like what happened on July 20th, people were falling off the ship into the ocean. Only 16 left now. The next afternoon, people found one of the main valves was broken. Huge amount of water was entering, and the ship was sinking and tilting sideways. But the second engineer, the only engineering officer alive by now, was nowhere to be found. They were so close to Japan now, but they had no choice but to call Mayday. Liu asked the remaining crew to unlock the lifeboats they stowed away earlier during the hijack, and made some rafts just in case. Liu then followed the captain to fix the communication equipment and send out distress calls. In the meantime, Chief Mate and 3 other people took a wooden raft they just made and escaped. When Liu found out, they were already 30 feet away. Now that distress calls were made, Liu decided to just let them go. He later mentioned to the people on the ship to frame everything that had happened to those 4 people who just escaped. But who could have imagined, in a while, Liu would see these 4 people again? The ship lowered its anchor and waited, but the wooden raft was pushed back to the ship by the current and hit the ship right in the stem. Liu Guiduo then ordered the crew to collect iron weights used for squid fishing and throw them at the 4 people on the raft. One of Liu's men even jumped off the ship and stabbed them with a harpoon. Soon they were drenched in blood. Liu Guiduo ordered the crew to pull one of the men up. One of the remaining 3 people who tried to escape was among the original 9-people team who plotted the hijack. Liu was furious and very disappointed in him. Liu destroyed the raft and watched the 3 of them swim away until the sharks found them. As for the man who they pulled up, Liu ordered the last 2 people on board who hadn't killed to tie him up, wrap him with iron weights, and toss him into the ocean again. Since they hadn't fished for over a month, their supplies went low, and they hadn't refilled on fuel, the ship stopped sinking after a while. The 11 people lived in peace on the ship until rescue arrived on July 29th. The 4 people who tried to escape could have lived, because Liu Guiduo mentioned there were 15 people on the ship in his distress call. This is everything about the massacre on LuRongYu 2682. The details were provided by court records in the interview with one of the survivors after he did his time in jail. What was really sad was that these 33 men all had good plans for their lives after the job. The trigger that led to this series of killing was the unfair contract. In fact, the court later found out that the employer listed on the contract, provided by the owner of the Squid ship, was an unregistered, quote-unquote, fake company. So the contract was void in the first place, but the company, Xinfa Holdings, was not fined for its illegal labor contracts and is operating normally to this day. This case involved 33 people and spanned several months, so it took me a lot of effort to clean up and visualize the intricate relationship and the timeline. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like and subscribe button. Thank you, and see you in the next video!